Hello everybody, I'm back continuing my look at the recent Iron Man themed retro carded wave from Marvel Legends, and it is the turn of the third and final Iron Man in this wave. Just as you think Hasbro have exhausted every possible Iron Man armour there is, they've actually gone back now and are starting to tweak a few old favourites. And today we have what is considered Model 20 or Mark 20, but basically this is the costume that Iron Man wore in the early 2000s. By now, if you've been watching any of the other videos in this series that I've done on this wave, you'll know what to expect from the packaging. It's nostalgic, it's linking back to the ToyBiz animated series, carded figures that we used to get in the 90s. I love it, I think it's fantastic, and it looks great on display. Sure, the reverse is less impressive, there's a lot less to talk about here, and you're probably not going to stare at this for too long, but it is nice that it's got the nostalgic design, and they've stayed true to that for the most part. So let's move right along into talking about this figure. As I said, this is the costume that he adopted in the early 2000s, and it's not one that I actually owned previously. That's not to say it hasn't had a release, of course, because ToyBiz actually tackled this model way back when, and yeah, it left a lot to be desired. It certainly looks very gawky and gangly by today's standards, and even at the time I remember thinking, yeah, this Iron Man isn't for me really. I wasn't a huge fan of this design, and the action figure they put out just didn't feel right to me. So this, I think, actually does mark a big step up. This is a lot more accurate in terms of proportions and detailing, which is great, and I think they've done a pretty decent job when it comes to sculpting, as you would expect. Now, for this release, Hasbro have clearly gone back to their colour scheme that they adopted a few Iron Man waves ago, going back a couple of years, where they have this sort of rich metallic paint used for the gold part of the costume, and a very shiny plastic for the red, which works an absolute treat. I really like this colour scheme. I think it works very, very well, and they've done a really good job here. You can see there's actually an awful lot of detail in this sculpting. I think this is all entirely brand new actually, so all credit to Hasbro for investing in some brand new tooling here, and I think it looks really good. Where it falls down slightly, as ever, is in the lack of paint wash, because there's so many bits and pieces here, you know, cuts and grooves and things like that, and if there was a wash just running over this, it would really draw that detail out. So I think, you know, they're kind of hurting themselves by not applying that, because this is actually a really nice sculpt. But as it is, I think it looks really good for the most part, and thankfully he has no issues standing either, which is great. This can sometimes be an issue when they have this sort of boot sculpt on the feet. This works absolutely very, very well. He has no problem standing whatsoever, and he looks pretty solid. So let's take a look at the articulation. There's 2 points in the neck, one at the top and one at the base. The head will spin all the way around, and there's a little bit of wiggle room to move from side to side, but not really proper articulation. Thankfully, he can lift his head forwards and backwards a really healthy distance, which is great. Now, he's got a butterfly wing joint. It's very subtle, but it is actually there. Not a huge range of motion here, but, you know, there's enough to give us a little bit extra. He's got the ball joints in the shoulder, he's got the bicep swivel, double joint at the elbow, straight swivel at the waist, and then there is a ball joint in the upper torso that will allow the figure to bend forwards, but not backwards, sadly, because of that plastic piece there. Now he's got ball joint in the hips, so the legs will kick out to the side. There's the upper thigh swivel there. The legs will kick forwards and they'll go backwards a little bit, and then we have another double joint at the knee, which is great. You can kick that lower leg all the way back there. And then he does sort of have an ankle pivot, but it really only swivels from side to side. And it kind of hinges as well, but it doesn't really rock particularly. Accessories wise, he just comes with an additional pair of hands, one open and one closed fist, and 4 individual repulsor blasts. Now, I've got to be honest, this is a little bit disappointing having the same accessory 4 times over. They're all the same shape, colour and size. As you can see with mine, they have a tendency to curl, which doesn't look fantastic, and these never really seem to scale properly. Like, it just doesn't look natural when it's coming out of his palm there. It just looks a little bit too oversized. And then if we look at the feet, they look kind of undersized. It doesn't look quite right. I think it might have been more effective if they'd opted for different colours, just to make it feel like you're getting something slightly different and you could interchange them. That might have been a bit more interesting. Ideally, we could have had some different blast effects here, and we've had many over the years, so I don't see why they couldn't have just thrown them in. So this is a little bit underwhelming. It would have been nice if we'd had an alternate head, say, as well, you know, an unmasked Tony Stark head within his helmet. That would have been kind of cool, but sadly, no. So it feels like this is lacking a little bit in this department. And so overall for me, I'm just going to give this figure 3 stars. Again, it's one of those middle of the road figures where it's perfectly good. I'm really glad to have another variant in my collection, even if it is a remaster of a previous release. I think it looks pretty cool. I do like the sculpting, looks really good, and the paint apps that we see, particularly the gold, looks really nicely done. So I think it looks the part. It just feels like it's just lacking a little bit, and I think, you know, that lack is coming from the lack of paint apps, but also the accessories feel a little bit underwhelming here as well. So this one really comes down to whether you're an Iron Man completist, whether you want to have all these different armours in an appropriate scale. Otherwise, given the fact that there is no bath in this wave, there's really no incentive to pick this up. So I think it just really comes down to whether you like this particular model or this particular version of the armour, and whether you've got a gap in your collection that you want to fill. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.